In order to create these details here, I've opened a new file and loaded the reference image in the top view, and you can see I've scaled it up quite a bit to over 5,600 pixels, so I have something that hopefully is a little bit easier to work with. And we're going to start this with the holes, and we're going to build this area from the inside to the outside. First of all, I'm going to use a disk with only one segment, and I'll give it 12 rotation segments. Let's scale this down. I'm going to center it on one of these holes here and scale it down a bit further. I'm going to put it into a cloner. And let's clone it along the x-axis. We need 8 copies. So that looks about right. I'm going to put this in a connect object, make this editable, go to model mode, and I'm going to place the axis at 0 on the x and the z axes. And now we can put this in a symmetry object and mirror it over on the xy plane. Let's make this editable. And I'm going to start connecting the geometry using the polygon pen tool. And I'm going to connect 4 of these polygons like this. I'm going to connect these edges here and delete this half of the object. And I'm going to connect the top holes to the bottom holes. I'm going to ring select these edges here, connect them, delete the bottom, and I'm going to connect the rest of the geometry. Over here I'm just going to extrude this edge over and move it to 0, and I'm going to optimize this object. For this detail here, I'm going to start with a separate disk. Again, we only need one segment. I'm going to use a few more rotation segments for this one, and I'm going to scale it down, move it over, scale it down a bit more. Scale it up a bit. And now we can make this editable. Delete these points. Select these edges here. And I'm going to clone them. And now we can delete this point. And extrude this edge over, and I'm going to extrude this edge down. Let's connect these two objects. And I'm going to move the axis to the center again. And I can extrude this edge. Move it to 0. And let's select this edge and move it to 0 on the z-axis. So we need to connect these two pieces, and the way I'm going to do this is by connecting these edges here. And let's make a cut over like this. So now we can add polygons here. And we also need a cut here and here. And now we can connect the geometry like this, close this polygon hole here, remove the n-gon, and I'm going to triangulate this. And I'm going to make cuts straight over just to make the geometry look a little more neat. I'm going to weld these points here. Let's make another cut and weld these 2 points. And next I'm going to create some edges here, because we also need to connect these areas. And then we can select these edges here and these ones and use stitch and sew to connect the geometry like this. And let's check the polygons. And you can see not all of them have the same normal direction. I'm just going to align the normals. And it also looks like I screwed something up here. So I'm just going to scale these polygons down to 0 on the y-axis and then move them back to 0. And we can reduce the polygon count a little bit, because the further we move away from these details on the inside here, the fewer edges I want to have in order not to create too much geometry. So what we could do is weld these points here. And then we could select these points and move them down a little bit and dissolve these edges here. There's no need to have triangles in these areas. And I'm going to select the edges on the outside and extrude them out to about here. I'm going to select all of these points and weld them and use the move tool and axis center to line this point up. And I'm going to extrude these edges to about here. And we can move this edge over and move this edge over. And this will give us the area to create this rectangular hole here. I'm going to extrude these out one more time. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to weld these points here. And that means we can get rid of these edges. And we can also get rid of these ones. seems that the ones over here are not centered, so I'm going to change that by moving them to the center here. Now we can use a symmetry object, and let's use a second symmetry. I'm going to make this editable. And we can get rid of these edges here. And down here I'm going to delete these points and just create some straight cuts like this. Remove these edges by dissolving them. And I'm going to extrude these edges down to about here. And over here, I'm going to move these points up a little bit further, maybe something like this. And I'm going to select these polygons here and use extrude inner. And let's make sure these edges are straight. We can scale these down and move them into position. So something like this maybe. And we can also try to reduce the polygon count down here. So what I'll do is I'll make a cut here, and then I'm just going to weld some of these points like so and remove these edges. And over here I'm going to extrude these edges over. And just select these polygons, use extrude inner. And scale them a little bit. And that's it. So now we can copy this object. Let's call this details. And I'm going back to my original file and I'm going to paste the object. And I'm going to move it into position over here. And scale it down. So that looks about right. And one thing we can do right away is we can get rid of this edge here, or this edge loop at the center. I'm just going to dissolve that. I'm also going to delete the polygons on my other object where the details need to be. I'm going to optimize the object. I'm going to select these edges here. and snap them to these edges. So now let's go and figure out how we can connect these two objects. Back here we need to create a couple of additional cuts. Let's do this point. I'm just going to dissolve this edge for now. And let's make another cut here, here, and here. And we can continue these to the back of the object. And we also need a cut here and over here. So now we should be able to connect the back of this object to our frame. Here at the front, I'm going to continue these edges here. And we also need to continue this one. Connect these two edges. Connect these 2 points. And then I'm just going to select all of the edges here at the back. And connect those. And then connect these 2 points. So let's have a look. On this object here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges. And on this object here, we have 7 edges, as you can see over here. So let's go ahead and reduce those to 5 as well. I'm going to make a cut like this, and then I'm going to weld these points here, which means I can dissolve these 2 edges. And now I've got 5 edges over here as well. Let's continue over here. Let's add a cut here and another one here. And this point here will eventually be connected to this point. So what I'll do is, well, it's not going to be directly connected to this point. What I'm going to do is I'll make a cut and connect these 2 edges, and let's continue the geometry here like this. So we have this edge connected to this one. We can connect this one to this one. And I think I'll just modify the geometry a little bit. We're going to make sure that we can connect these 2 edges here, and we're going to make a cut from this point later on across to here, which means we can then connect the geometry to this point, and then we have these 2 edges over here. I think I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So 1 edge, 2 edge, we're going to have a 3rd one here, over here, that we can connect to this one, and then we can connect these 2 edges. We also have to create a cut over here, and also I think we need to cut over to this point. Let's just do that. And we need 2 more cuts here, one here and another one here. And we're pretty much done. Let's go ahead and change the geometry on this one. So I'm going to cut here, I'm going to cut here, and I'm going to cut here, which means we can dissolve these 2 edges. So now you can see how I'm going to combine these 2 objects together. Now let's go ahead and connect and use connect objects and delete. I'm also going to optimize the object. And let's start closing those holes using the polygon pen. So over here, I'm going to connect these 2 points. I can't do that, so I have to make a cut. Let's make another cut here. And let's make sure that we only have 1 point in these areas, which we don't. So I'm going to select these 2 and just weld them together. Same here. Let's also check these ones. And everything seems to be fine here. So over here we can close the holes as well, which leaves this area here. So it looks like we need a couple more cuts here. So I think what I'll do is I'll just make a cut here, which means we can get rid of this edge. That's deleted. And we can connect the geometry like this. And we need 1 additional edge. Actually, it looks like we don't. I think we can get rid of this edge here. Let's just select this entire loop and dissolve it. So that means we need 1 additional cut here. And create these polygons. So that's looking pretty clean. Let's go ahead and check for n-gons. We have 3 and I want to get rid of those, so I'm going to select them. And what we need to do is just create another cut here. And over here we can delete this point and just weld these 2 together. So that's looking good. Okay, so now let's go ahead and extrude the rest of the details. I think what I still need to do is select this polygon here and use extrude inner. And I'm going to scale it a little bit. Maybe move it over. Something like this. And I'm also going to select all of the other polygons that I'm going to extrude. And I probably shouldn't have deleted the edge back there. We're going to change that in a second. Let's just select all the polygons that we need to extrude first. Then let's go to edge mode. I'm just going to create a cut here, and then I'm going to continue this cut over to here and over here. I'm going to make another cut here and connect these 2 points. So let's go back to polygon mode, deselect these 2 polygons here, and let's extrude these down, maybe -1. And there we go, that's our finished frame. Let's put this into 2 symmetry objects. And maybe let's add a floor. I'm going to snap it to the bottom of the frame, create a white material, and let's do a quick render. So you can see this is looking very nicely. Let's do a render to the picture viewer. I've got a width and height of 1920 by 1080. So you can see this is looking pretty neat. And if we do another wireframe render, you can also see that our geometry is pretty nice and clean. It is a fairly high poly object though, because we have so many small details in there and we need all that geometry. And next we're going to create the top of our SciFi floor panel.